Good morning and welcome. We're here today, as you know, for the release of the Domicile Unknown report on people who died in 2022 while experiencing homelessness. I'm going to give you the run of show. We'll be hearing some remarks from Street Roots Executive Director Kaya Sand, then Dr. Paul Lewis, the Deputy Multnomah County Health Officer, who's worked on every Domicile Unknown report since 2011. Next will be Sarah I. Honorone, who is the Executive Director of the Street Trust. We will be hearing from Sergeant Ty Engstrom from the Portland Police Bureau Traffic Investigation Unit. Brian Geeney is with us. We're very grateful for from the he's the Oregon Field Office Director for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And finally, our Multnomah County Chair, Jessica Vega-Peterson. Then we'll take questions from reporters. I also just want to point out there's a few people in the audience today. Chief Medical Legal Death Investigator Kim DeLeo from the Medical Examiner's Office is here. Thank you, Kim. And I just want to pause for a second just to thank and to acknowledge the families of every single person counted in this report. I particularly want to thank the families who worked on the report and join us in trying to make sense of all of this. Tamara Elstrom, who shared the story of her brother John. Stephanie Lathram, who spoke with us about her little brother Jeremy Hoffman. And Jake Osmus and his wife Leela, who are here to honor the life of Jake's sister Angela Boyd. So thank you, and with that, Kaya.
Thank you, Julie, and welcome to the members of press and families and Street Roots vendors who are also here. We're always a big part of us doing this. In 2022, at least 315 people who are unhoused died 3 decades before their time in Multnomah County. And I want to also point out this is not just on the streets. These are folks who are in shelters, in safe rest villages, in folks who don't have stable housing. The reason that Street Roots is so deeply involved in this is that we're committed to knowledge. We're committed to the fact that we need to confront the truth and do what we can with that truth. And through that confrontation, that's both about grieving, acknowledging, and also finding any solutions that we can find. In 2010, in fact, then Street Roots Director Israel Bayer approached Dr. Paul Lewis, who will follow me, really pushing to have this happen. Then Multnomah County Commissioner Deborah Kafori joined up. And what followed from that was a deep commitment to this truth. And that I really have come to admire medical examiners who reach out to families, they reach out to social contacts to really understand who it is that we're losing, and so that we have this knowledge. There's things that we're able to do with this knowledge. The county's severe weather shelters have really emerged because of tracking this, of looking at the seasons, of tracking hypothermia and hyperthermia. In 2018 was the first time we saw any deaths by fentanyl. So before that, it was always deaths by heroin. And there were 2 people that year. And to put that in perspective, Oregon is still in the lower half of states with fentanyl deaths because it hit the East Coast so much more rapidly 5 years earlier. So we, by having this knowledge, by seeing it enter into the deaths that we are dealing with, we know that these deaths are actually preventable. I bring up naloxone because I hope everyone knows that in this state you don't need a prescription to go into a pharmacy, buy naloxone. We have naloxone we distribute here thanks to our vendor program manager, Carly Ng, who's really fought to make it accessible to anyone who comes in. So fentanyl deaths are preventable if people don't have to die hiding, and I think that's a really important piece of that. So I just want to wrap up by announcing that tomorrow is the day of remembrance for people who die on the streets. And Ground Score will hold a day of remembrance. In the Q&A, we can give more details about that. But that is chosen because it's the darkest day of the year. And I think it's really important for us to pause with the gravity of this information and really recognize that it's a collective grief. It's an indictment on an entire nation that is deeply unequal, that has a frayed, if not missing, social safety net. So this is what we are dealing with. Poverty is a leading cause of death in this nation. And so we grieve, but then the darkest day of the year is followed by days that get lighter. Then we also solve. And those are the two pieces I really wanted to put forward, is that we take both at once, right? Grief and knowledge can come together. So I am really, really honored to now hand the podium over to Dr. Paul Lewis, one of the founders of this research, who stayed with it all these years. He's the Deputy Health Officer, Dr. Paul Lewis.
Good morning. Thanks, Kaya, for hosting us here this morning. I think the Day of Remembrance is, Kaya put it very, very, very well. This report, which you all have now, I believe, is full of a lot of numbers, a lot of careful analysis. I always like to point out that we know it's an underestimate, maybe even a big underestimate, because it's hard to be certain that someone's living without adequate shelter. But every one of these persons is a brother, a sister, a mother and father, and there's some great reporting in the report that you have with some of those stories, which I think illustrate how close all of us are to suffering what some of these people did. You know, my prepared remarks were supposed to include a lot of statistics, but I didn't think that would really go over too well. A little bit more about the origin story, maybe in a more optimistic time in the aughts. There was an organization called Coalition for a Livable Future, and they held a big annual conference hosted by PSU. And it was after I gave a talk there that I was confronted by Mr. Israel Bear and challenged to look into this topic. And I love a challenge, and then Commissioner Kafoury encouraged us to look into this. It was a real shoestring operation. It's much more sophisticated now. And at the time, and as the years went by and the numbers crept up, we worried, oh my God, it's a death every week. And then it was every 2 weeks. And you know, you don't have to be a mathematician to know we're approaching it every day now. We're in the 300s now. So point number one, it's too many, too many deaths. Lots of statistics in there, all the different breakdowns. Average age was 49. The hospitalized people are a little bit older, in the 50s. They're too young. It's far, far less than anticipated life expectancy in the United States. So people are dying too young. And then the causes of death are just, for someone like me, one of my specialties is preventive medicine. These are preventable deaths. Most of them or the majority are nearly half are unintentional, right? Not planning on dying that day, but they did. And then others are quite disheartening are deaths of violence, interpersonal violence. Our epidemiologists and statisticians estimate that there's more than a 30-time greater rate of homicide deaths among people experiencing homelessness than the general population. I hesitate to use an exact number, but it's pushing a quarter of the homicides in 2022 were in people experiencing houselessness. So that's kind of completely out of control. And then, one of the things I get to do as part of this is I read the reports that the medical examiners group puts together every year. And I wish I could delegate that. No one else wants to do it. It's a very traumatizing experience to read about the folks who died under these circumstances, often without shelter, companionship, etc. Certainly not the way any of us hope that our final days go. So again, I'm going to turn it over on a special subtopic to our Street Roots partner, Sarah in her own. Thank you.
Thank you. And you're not the first one to confuse the Street Trust and Street Roots. We actually hired someone who thought he was applying to Street Roots. He stayed with us for a while before going on to become a streetcar ambassador for Portland Streetcar. So we think we're all in this together, right? And we know that that's the case. My name is Sarah Iannarone. I am the director of the Street Trust. And we unfortunately just hosted World Day of Remembrance for Victims of Traffic Violence last month, and we represented that with sleeping bags this year to resemble body bags because we were aware of the fact that people experiencing houselessness are overrepresented in our traffic fatalities statistics, and we know that they're overrepresented in this report as well. I am here on behalf of our members at the Street Trust because we believe that streets are about more than transportation. They're lifelines for our communities, and they're essential for health, opportunity, and liberty. Our streets belong to all of us regardless of how we get around them, and we all have the right, whether we're a student walking to school, a parent pushing a stroller, a veteran using a mobility device, an elder waiting for a bus, a worker bicycling to their job, or a person experiencing houselessness. We all have the right to use the streets safely and with dignity. Ensuring safe streets for all is not optional. It's essential to a just and prospering society. Today's report reflects the growing and intersecting epidemics manifesting on our streets, which we must coordinate across boundaries and sectors to address with urgency and resolve. This is not just a challenge for politicians or urban planners or public health professionals to solve, but it's a call to action for us all. Our response must be unified. We must harness the power of data and science, of innovations and proven practices, of community education and organizing. We must all work together to shift this trajectory. This is how we begin transforming our streets from battlegrounds to safe havens, from depressing places where people are dying to vibrant spaces where communities can thrive. While compassion, concern, and bold vision are essential to turning around this crisis, we need much more than that. We need tangible, urgent action along with concrete investments in safe, complete streets. One key strategy in the fight against traffic deaths is addressing excessive speeds and impairment on our streets, particularly at night when low visibility is a factor. In Tucson, they followed the crash data and reduced speed limits during nighttime. In Utah, they lowered the legal blood alcohol concentration limit to 0.05 and saw a significant drop in crashes and fatalities. Additionally, we can invest in automated speed cameras and photo radar to ensure that traffic laws are enforced in an ongoing, widespread, equitable basis and never a bargaining chip in political disputes. But measures such as these alone are not enough. We need a holistic Safe Streets for All investment strategy, which focuses on improving our deadliest roadways and is championed both by the Oregon legislature and local governments. We must find the political will to ensure adequate funding for investments in the safety initiatives and infrastructure we urgently need to protect our most vulnerable users. As we honor and reflect on the alarming trends and tragic losses in our community discussed here today, let us remember that behind every statistic is a person's story. These deaths are our neighbors, friends, and family members whose lives have been tragically cut short. Our commitment to safer streets is more than a policy debate, it's a moral imperative. It's about honoring the lives we lost by taking action to prevent future tragedies. So in conclusion, as Kai has said, let us leave here today not just with a sense of sorrow, but with a renewed determination for the future. Let us transform our grief into action, bold visions into reality, and commit to investments in safe streets for all, regardless of zip code, travel mode, or housing status. Thank you. And over to you, Officer Sergeant Ty Engstrom of the Portland Police Bureau.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm Ty Engstrom. I'm a sergeant with Portland Police Bureau's Traffic Division. And I wanted to share a little bit with you today about traffic-related matters, which have unfortunately played a significant role in this report that has been written and in what is happening on our roadways with the houseless community and those who are experiencing houselessness. Back in April of 2022, we wanted to highlight one of the crashes that took place on Powell Boulevard. Later in the evening, Angela Boyd was hit and killed. Her family is here with us today. I wanted to share a little bit of some updates about that case because that was a hit and run case where someone actually hit her and then pulled off into a parking lot and then subsequently took off and never came back. So I do have some updates on that crash that I wanted to share and put out a vehicle description as well. Before I go on to that, there was also another person who came into the crime scene, went through police barricades, who was also intoxicated as we were investigating that crash that night. So lots of people on the roadways that are driving under the influence of intoxicants. But the vehicle that was involved in that crash was a dark gray Subaru Crosstrek with oversized wheels, black rims, and it was gray in color, left some gray paint chips there at the crime scene, had tinted windows. We weren't able to get close enough view for the license plate, but we do have that vehicle on camera. So the family has also expressed to me today that they want to offer up a monetary reward to anybody who provides information to Crime Stoppers that helps lead to the arrest and prosecution of this driver. So please contact our Crime Stoppers hotline for that, or go onto the city's website where you can file a tip on that. Now, over the last 3 years, unfortunately, we have experienced almost the same number of traffic fatalities on our roadways consecutively. In 2022, we had 67 total fatalities. 2021, 69 total fatalities, and this year we're again at 67 and still have a week and a half to go to the end of the year. Of those crashes, in 22, 17 of them were fatal hit and run crashes where the operator did not stick around and fled the scene. In 2021, 13 of them were hit and run fatalities, and this year, so far, 7 of them are hit and run fatalities. One more number I wanted to share with you for each of those 3 years is the number of people experiencing houselessness that was killed in a traffic fatality. In 2021, 23 people died. Again, that was 69 total, and 23 of them were people experiencing houselessness. In 2022, 67 total, 15 of them were people experiencing houselessness. And this year so far, of the 67 total, 11 are experiencing or were experiencing houselessness. There's a lot of different reasons why those crashes take place. Sometimes the motorist is at fault, sometimes a pedestrian is not where they're supposed to be, or a cyclist. There's lots of different factors that go into these investigations. As a crash team sergeant, my job is to go out there with my team at all hours of the day and night and put together the best package we possibly can for the families and victims of these individuals. To paint a picture, to fill in the gaps, put the puzzle together and trying to figure out exactly what happened. And after going to hundreds of fatal crashes and seeing all types of scenarios, what I want to express to you today is that we all use these roadways together. And we have to share them appropriately, and we have to drive appropriately and at reasonable speeds, and we have to be vigilant. Now, often I'm riding a motorcycle at work. I'm an avid cyclist. I like to go jogging. I'm using these roadways in a lot of different manners. And I do so with the thought of something's gonna happen right up here. And if I anticipate that, I can kind of act appropriately and maybe prevent a little bit of that and anticipate the person cutting me off or the person pulling out in front of me or the person standing where they're not supposed to or whatever. Now, as we heard earlier, tomorrow is the darkest day of the year, and I will join with everybody else in remembering those that have died on our roadways and within our city. Also, that's a good reminder to be visible, be vigilant, be seen. Wear appropriate clothing if you're out there biking and riding. One of the other fatals that we had a couple years ago down on Water Avenue, many of you might remember, involved a cyclist. And oftentimes as cyclists and runners, we may think we are more visible than we actually are. And we need to assume that people aren't seeing us. And we need to be as visible as we possibly can. And if you're operating a motor vehicle, you need to act as if someone's going to step out of you in front of you at any given moment. We have very tight streets. Not all of them are well lit. We have lots of street parking that people can step out from between cars. Please be safe. Be vigilant. And as we go into these darkest days of the year, please be careful, be safe, and use our roadways appropriately. I thank you for your time. I'm going to turn the time over to Brian Guinea of the Oregon Field Office for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. He is the director for this area. Brian.
Hey, good morning, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Brian Guinea, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, your Oregon Field Office Director here. As mentioned, every year we take time to remember those that have died while being unhoused. Tomorrow night, across the nation, communities are coming together to illuminate the stories of those who died without housing. Last Friday, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development released the 2023 Annual Homeless Assessment Report. This is the annual snapshot nationally of individuals in shelters, temporary housing, and unhoused settings. The report found that more than 20,000 Oregonians were experiencing homelessness on a single night in 2023, and that's a 12% increase from 2022. The rise in homelessness at the beginning of 2023 continued the pre-pandemic trend, which began in 2016 when homelessness also increased. President Biden's American Rescue Plan, the single largest investment in preventing and ending homelessness in U.S. history, the emergency housing vouchers, the other resources that flowed right here into Multnomah County, reduced the situation, which could have been a lot worse. But many of these ARP resources, many of these one-time resources have now expired or have wound down, which has contributed to an increase in homelessness. Oregon as a whole continues to have the highest percentage of people in families with children that are unsheltered and of youth that are unhoused, that are unsheltered. There are some bright spots in our region. In 2023, unsheltered homelessness in Clackamas and Washington County decreased. Sheltered homelessness across the three-county metro area also increased by more than 400 people. And this is a direct result of the new resources, expanded emergency shelters, housing case management support, rental assistance, and permanent supportive housing that are coming online. But in recognition of these sobering facts and statistics, an additional $12 million in special funding, special federal funding for additional housing vouchers, specifically to reduce unsheltered homelessness, came into Multnomah County in 2023. Yesterday, we were pleased to announce that Home Forward, in partnership with the Oregon Department of Human Services and Multnomah County, were the recipients, one of 13 public housing authorities in the nation that received family unification housing vouchers, additional vouchers for their programs. As you all know, all of these new resources are not enough. Lack of affordable housing fuels addiction, untreated illness, overdoses, and death on our streets. And all the work to solve homelessness has only gotten harder in the last year. In spite of these challenges we face in solving unsheltered homelessness, we do have one thing going for us that few other vexing social problems have. We know it works. We know that housing works to solve homelessness. We know that supportive housing can solve homelessness for people with some of the most complex needs. And we've proven this through study after study and in projects and new apartments being opened here in Multnomah County and across Oregon. Our federal commitment to Portland and to Oregon remains steadfast. We still have a lot of work to do, but events like this and the partnership and alignment is exactly what we need. And so I thank you for your time today, and please join me in welcoming our Multnomah County Chair, Jessica Vega-Peterson.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much for being here today to reflect on the strong support and partnership that HUD provides to Multnomah County and to Oregon. You, the work of HUD, and the good work is so appreciated here. I really am grateful for the 56 Family Unification Program vouchers that were announced yesterday. These vouchers are going to support families who need stable housing in order to stay together. And they also provide a better safety net for young people who are aging out of foster care. Nationally, we estimate that 20% of those youth become homeless the moment that they're emancipated at the age of 18. These are people and families who are desperately trying to make a way forward for themselves. And I'm so grateful that we have received the largest number of vouchers nationally, as this is a reflection of the successful partnership and programs, as well as the commitment to align this funding for supportive services and flexible assistance at Multnomah County and the Oregon Department of Human Services. I want to thank everyone who is here today for the release of the annual Domicile Unknown report. Thank you for being here and understanding the importance of this report and walking alongside the people of Multnomah County in this work and in this moment. Every year, this is such a sobering moment for our whole community. This is a moment when we sit together with the reality of our tragedy in our streets and the toll that it has taken. The deaths of 350 friends, neighbors, and loved ones, people whose lives were taken from us because they were experiencing homelessness on our streets. The fact that their deaths were premature, for some by more than 30 years, that the risk of death if you're homeless compared to the general population is 6 times higher, and a staggering 45 times higher for traffic-related deaths. We know that these friends and neighbors died because of the myriad ways that our complex systems haven't been there for them when they needed it the most. And that is devastating and heartbreaking for all of us. Some of these people didn't have housing, they didn't have social supports. Our challenge in developing enough affordable housing in a city that will need 63,000 units of affordable units in the next 20 years to keep up with the demand is really staggering. But we also know that other factors play a huge part in what we have in our report. Racial injustice in our society means that people from Black, Indigenous, Latina, and other communities disproportionately experience homelessness. For context, 4 in 10 people experiencing homelessness in this country are Black, African American, or African. That is compared to 13% of the US population in general. We cannot let these disparities continue to ruin lives. People don't have enough access to health care, both mental and physical, as they battle substance use disorder, mental health challenges, or both. In the years between 2018 and 2022, the number of people who have died on our watch has risen by nearly 30%. I find that very sobering, and I know you do too, that the raw and horrifying human costs are headed in the wrong direction. This loss of additional lives is beyond humbling, and today we sit with the full weight of these losses as a county and as a community. Today we also take time to honor those who have died, to recognize their humanity, their dignity, and their stories, along with the tragedy of the circumstances that ended their lives. We slow down to truly consider what these deaths have to teach us. And we want to send a message to everyone in Multnomah County, especially those who have lost the people that they've loved, that the death of your loved one is not acceptable to us, that we can and we must do better, and that the circumstances that led someone to die on our watch must change. That is the best way to honor the 315 people who lost their lives in 2022. It's to change our response to this crisis with commitment, with urgency, and with collaboration. That has been my focus since day one of coming into this office. And I want you to know that our response is changing here in Multnomah County. We've made those changes with better partnerships with our county and with our city governments, working together with the state of Oregon and our federal partners to coordinate better on governance, roles, responses, and investments. Those changes include working with Metro and Washington and Clackamas counties to coordinate data systems, our dollars, our investments. We have to bring together our system partners, our providers, to address homelessness in more coordinated and holistic ways so that we don't have people who are falling through the cracks. We know that these investments will have a big impact for the most people tonight, tomorrow, and in the weeks and months to come. The fact is we need more safe spaces for people living outside. So we are expanding our investment and coordination with our shelter response, including new day shelters to make sure people have places to stay safe at all hours of the day and night. We need more places for people to get contact as they're living on our streets. We need more touch points for those folks. So we're increasing outreach to all populations, including those that are the toughest to house, through direct on-the-ground connections made through Housing Multnomah Now, our Behavioral Health Resource Center, and our partnerships with the city's task sites. We lost 123 people to drug overdoses in 2022, with 74 of those deaths attributed to fentanyl. These were caused in part by barriers between our homelessness response and our behavioral health response. And to break down these barriers, we must do things differently. We need places for people to go when they're ready to detox or stabilize. We need more treatment options, and we need to make sure that our outreach offers not only shelter, but behavioral health resources. And we have to build our capacity. We are investing $6.8 million through a 24/7 stabilization center for people who are leaving withdrawal management or sobering. And we have invested $7 million in recovery-oriented housing. In 2022, we saw 14 people die in 1 year from traffic crashes. That was 10% of unintentional deaths. I have been talking about traffic fatalities since the very first, month in office as a state representative. I have had more vigils and acknowledgements of deaths that have happened on Powell and around Powell than I can count. And we have to make sure that that's going to change. We've got to make sure that people are safer, that we are doing what we can to enforce the laws for people to drive safely and hold people accountable. We have to make sure that people are visible when they're getting from here to there. That is why our team on the Joint Office is working on distributing gear that includes reflective material to help people stay seen and stay safe, especially at night when most of these fatalities occur. These changes also mean that we need to partner directly with people to better understand them and their needs, to make sure that those living today in unstable housing, recovering from crisis, or exiting foster care are known to us, tracked through a by name list, and offered stability and support. Stability and support looks like getting people off the street now with funding for 3,000 shelter beds this year, and with a focus on better flow through in shelters so people have shorter stays and are quickly connected to housing. This response has to look like the measurable and attainable goals that we've developed through our negotiations with the city, including a commitment to a 50% reduction in those living unsheltered by December 2025, a 15% increase in exits from shelter and housing, and a targeted and intentional reduction in racial disparities among our homeless population. That looks like culturally specific services, especially those from LGBTQIA2S+ communities who face discrimination and barriers. It looks like preventing people from becoming homeless in the first place. We know that prevention is cheaper and smarter than trying to get somebody back into housing. With some of the federal supports ending, we are seeing an increased number of people who are at risk of or experiencing eviction. So to respond to that, our rental assistance needs to be flexible. We know that supportive housing has to include long-term rental assistance and intensive supportive services. And we have to make sure that our permanent supportive housing needs keep people safely housed. We have a goal of 75% of people housed in the next year retaining their housing 24 months after placement. Because once somebody is stabilized and housed, we have to make sure that they stay that way. I want to end today with a recognition of the human value and potential that has been lost in the lives that we honor today. These were people's children, sisters, fathers, cousins, and friends, with big hearts, with dreams and potential. At Multnomah County, we care about those dreams, we care about that potential, and we want to make more of the things possible. It's impactful to all of us when that doesn't happen, and it's a responsibility of all of us as a community. That is a truth that we'll continue to wrestle with today and well beyond today. We will wrestle with it every day as we seek to support people better and put better systems in place to meet people's needs. As we slow down to reflect these losses, I want us to also look toward a future that doesn't include them. One where homelessness is more rare and brief, where people aren't dying on our streets in record numbers, and where they're better protected from the worst outcomes by the care that they're shown by our communities, our governments, our systems, and each other. I believe that this future is possible. I look forward to that future for all of us. So again, I thank you so much for being here today, to being here with us in this moment. And now I will turn the podium back over to Julie Sullivan-Spaghetti. Thank you.
Yeah, as we open it up for questions, I also want to call up Barbie Weber, who is the co-founder and co-executive director of Ground Score, so she's able to answer questions about the Day of Remembrance. And Kim Delio is the chief investigator for the medical examiner's office, so she's also up here.
Oh, we're gonna see Bonnie can get.
Yeah.
A little bit of a tight squeeze. Thanks. Would you like to say anything about the timing? Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. So tomorrow evening, we're gonna have a homeless night of remembrance down at 624 Northwest Cooch. This is in partnership with several different organizations. We are also, it's gonna be, gonna have a giveaway for people who are experiencing homelessness. Lots of food, lots of community. It's a time of music and remembrance, and most of all, healing. We do this every year, and I just encourage people to take a moment tomorrow, wherever you're at, if you're not able to come to the event or you're going someplace else, to take a moment tomorrow and think about those that we've lost. Because all these deaths are preventable. And, the reason we put this together is that we live in this bubble as a community, and it affects us. Like, these are our friends, these are somebody that we slept next to. These are somebody that we ate with. So we ask you to come and join us tomorrow between 5 and 7:30. Thank you.
What's that address again?
624 Northwest Cooch. Okay, it's right in the middle of, or down here in Chinatown. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So our reporters, feel free, go ahead, just say your, if you can say your affiliation and call out your question, we'll repeat it.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Connor with KBTV. This is questions for the county chair. It's been a week since you stood with the governor and the mayor talking about an emergency declaration for the fentanyl crisis. I just want to know where it stands. Clearly the numbers show that this crisis is greatly impacting the unhoused communities. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, we are working diligently to put that into action. I just met with the governor, her team, and the mayor's team, and my team yesterday to talk about that. So we are looking to put that into action.
Is there a timeline on when that will be released?
We want to make sure we've got the coordination happening and the things set up. So it will be happening very soon.
This question is for the chair as well. I'm Blair with KGW. You talk about working in partnership with the city, yet the city is doing things that hurt the homeless population in many ways when it comes to sweeping their campsites. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, we want to make sure that we're working in partnership with them to put the resources in place to help people become safely off the street. We want to make sure that we're coordinating with them in the outreach that is happening. Those are things that are really important to make sure that all of the resources that we're putting in there are having the biggest impact possible. I mean, what we're talking about today means we have to be doing a better job of that, and I think people very much expect us to doing that. Some of the things that they are doing in terms of the authority that they have over time, place, and manner, they are working on that, and they are working through that. I think what my priority is making sure that for anyone who is living outside, no matter what the situation, that outreach is happening to them, that connections to services are happening to them, that they are getting the support that they need to move into safer spaces like shelter and into housing. And those are all of the things that are important. I think if somebody is not able to stay at a certain place, that we need to make sure that options are available for them to go into a safer location. So whether you're talking about a sweep or people who are living in unsafe situations like on the sides of our highway, that we have options for those people. That's the priority that I have.
Also for the chair, Brandon McCoy, you mentioned a handful of detox beds the county funded this year. Does seeing the numbers of how many homeless people are dying from addiction change your urgency in creating sobering centers and detox beds?
Yeah, we have been working very closely with our healthcare partners, with CCOs, with some of our nonprofit partners to look at how we can maximize the resources that we have in our county. We also know that it's going to take partnership with the state, so we're having conversations about what can happen in this legislative session to get investments that are happening here. So there is the urgency that we need to act has been very real and very palpable. I was just talking to our health department director today about putting this into action. I think what we have to do is we need to make sure that we are we are all working together to put these resources in place, that we're doing what we can to both make sure that Narcan, which Kaya referred to, is in the hands of the people, because truly it is the strongest thing we have for people who are at risk of death or dying, to prevent that from happening. And we have to do a coordinated response of getting additional treatment beds, additional prevention campaigns, and resources for people. So what we're doing with the investments that we've made this year is really making sure that when people go through treatment or go through detox, that they are not being released out onto the street where chances of relapse are so much more likely. So that's one of the things why we wanted to make that investment this year, is when people have gone through things that are actually putting them on a better, healthier path, that they have a place to go to help to keep those investments strong and give them the space that they need to continue to stabilize.
Hi, Nettie Johnson. I want to ask the officer, the sergeant, a question.
Okay.
You deal with the traffic fatalities, right?
Yes,
So, a lot of people under the influence, correct?
yes.
Do you feel or do you believe that your officers or any of your co-workers are able to handle the legalization of Measure 110 in small amounts? When does that become a crime?
So your question is about Measure 110 and at what level the different drug possession amounts become a crime? Is that what it was?
Under the influence, like driving or whatnot.
Sure,
When does
sure.
it become a crime?
So some of those drug categories have not been categorized within your blood at a certain level yet, like alcohol is 0.08, right? So some of the other drugs, it's not a specific quantifiable amount, but what my officers are trained to do is to evaluate someone's impairment level. So the crime of driving while under the influence of intoxicants deals with impairment. And through standardized field sobriety tests and observations, if those officers can determine that that person is impaired by a substance, then they can absolutely place that person under arrest.
When do you make it notice to the public, whether it's alcohol or fentanyl or heroin or meth, when they're driving? When does it become a crime?
If they're impaired.
Okay.
It doesn't matter
The
what.
next question is for the chair lady.
Can we give somebody else a chance and then
Sure,
come
go
back to you? Is that okay, Hattie?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. Nicole?
Yeah, Nicole Hagan with the Oregonian. I had a question about the data set. So it started with 400 something possible homeless deaths, and then 315 were confirmed. So I was wondering, there's about 100. Were you able to confirm that those individuals had a home, or are there still unknowns? Is there like 100 additional that could possibly be person?
Yeah, so great question about how we came up with this number. So one of the principles we've had since 2010 is we wanted to have this number be absolutely rock solid, that there were at least this many deaths among people who met the definition of being unhoused. So we're pretty strict. The methods are described in the report about the current HUD definition for that. So it's a little bit complicated. Let me know how much detail you want. We can go into this a little bit more later. This is a bridge year, 2022. A new state law went into effect in January of 22 that required deaths outside of the medical examiner's jurisdiction for the funeral authorizer to note whether they were houseless or not. Additional work was done by our epidemiologist Jamie Walters to make sure there were no obvious discrepancies there. I reviewed a large series of deaths that were noted to be potentially homeless in the medical examiner database and applied the similar definition. So, simple example, several were actually people who died in Multnomah County, but perhaps were transported or airlifted from the coast or somewhere else, therefore didn't have like a local address. And so it was just noted as no local address. Other folks turned out on more investigation to actually have a stable nighttime residence. So very strict on that because I wanted there never to be any question that we're cooking the books and overestimating. So I guarantee you that this number is an underestimate of the total number of deaths among the unhoused.
Is there possible that there's a chunk that's unknown that you aren't able to confirm one way or the other? Is there an unknown in that 100?
Right. And then we did a secondary method with a joint office of housing to look in the database called HMIS to see if people that we couldn't determine from reviewing the record might have been entered into that system as being unhoused. So again, we tried to be comprehensive but strict at the same time.
Claire?
Claire, Associated Press, I have a question for you as well. Is it accurate to say that the 315 deaths set a new annual record? And that's a pretty significant increase from the 2021 deaths of 193. How do you explain the main driver behind this increase?
Right. So again, this is a bridge year. Excuse me. This is a system that will not be silenced. So it's a bridge year because we use two data sources this year. But even if we just use the same source we've been using since 2010, the medical examiner database, the number is still up. And someone will have to give me a hint there. I think that was 249.
Yep.
That was 249 compared to the number from, 2021. So part of the increase is because of the change in state law and the more comprehensive net that was cast. It was very difficult for us to capture deaths in the hospital. Someone could have been there for weeks and then their bodies are released and disposed of. We didn't know that death was among a non-housed person.
And it's fair to say that 315 was a new record?
For sure, but even the 249 would have been a new record using this same. So again, going forward, I think our plan, I'm looking to my friends in the audience, is to continue to be as comprehensive as possible using both data sources. So 2023, you'll be able to directly compare to 2022.
So we have time for about one more, if anybody has one. Go ahead, Brandon.
HUD, we often hear from governments and service providers that whether it is housing vouchers or credits and grants for affordable housing development, that the logjam is at HUD through waitlists and otherwise. What needs to happen in order to work at the speed that this crisis needs?
Yeah, great. Yeah, absolutely critical question. So as field-based staff, so we administer the programs, the Congress funds, and the administration through the secretary sets the priority. We as your field-based team, we are doing everything we can across the state, not just here in Multnomah County, but to make sure that whether it's voucher utilization rates, it's federal funds through either annual funding or special funding that comes out for priorities, rural homelessness, unsheltered homelessness, that our partners know how to apply for those funds, can access those resources before they go with state funding, county funding, local measures, things like that. So we execute the programs in the state, but we also have a duty to inform, to find out when there are bottlenecks in the system, when there are some of the waivers that came out as a result of COVID and the CARES Act and the American Recovery Plan. kind of historic waivers for unlocking federal funds, that message is getting back up to our congressional delegation, to our leadership in DC to say, hey, folks, partners in Oregon have figured out how to make these funds work more creatively. How do we double down on that? Not just for Oregon, but other states should be doing that as well. But yeah, as we identify bottlenecks, underutilization of funds being returned to the Treasury that could have been more efficiently deployed, we work with partners directly. We provide technical assistance through intermediaries and third parties as soon as we find those to try to get that money moving.
Thank you everyone for coming. I do want to call attention to, when we're talking about the hospital data that we now have, that it really is the leadership of our medical examiners, investigators, to be pushing this forward that led to the Oregon legislature passing that law. So this is our first year that we now do have that information. It's a really important step that we've taken in 2022 to know more about the people who are dying in hospitals. So thank you to Julie Sullivan-Springhetti for doing so much work to bring this together. And thank you, members of the press, for coming, and Street Roots vendors and Street Roots staff for being so accommodating. This is actually the Street Roots holiday, so a lot of vendors are also here to actually receive holiday gifts. So it's a complicated day at Street Roots, as it always is. Take care.